Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started, so try not to keep you. Thanks for your patience. Had a little computer meltdown here, but as she said, I'm Jill Fritz. I'm Michigan Senior State Director for the Humane Society of the United States, and I was also director of the Keep Michigan Wolves Protected campaign, a wild and rollicking 2-year campaign to overturn wolf hunting legislation in our state. Before I get started on the craziness of what happened with that, I just want to give a little background of my opinion on the state of wildlife management right now. I believe that wildlife management, particularly in Michigan, by democratic values and the best available science and the public trust doctrine, has pretty much been jettisoned in favor of pandering to the lowest and most aggressive interests. In Michigan, and I'm sure other Midwest states as well, we no longer have a representative democracy in Michigan, or in particular in our state of Michigan, even a direct democracy, which is guaranteed to citizens of Michigan under our Constitution. Even that has been circumvented in the wildlife management process. Rather than recognizing that the public are equal owners of wildlife, state agencies and legislators and legislatures have dug in their heels in a losing battle to increase hunter recruitment, corporate sponsorship, and the number of species to be hunted. That is their priority here in the Midwest now, and particularly in Michigan. It's all money, all politics, all the time. They no longer care what the people have to say about wildlife. And the powers that be have gone to extraordinary lengths, particularly in my state of Michigan, to circumvent the democratic process. We saw that they don't care what the people think. After wolves had been delisted in 2000 and in early 2012, and then in 2013, more than 1.5 million public comments opposing wolf delisting were sent to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as Defenders of Wildlife said, the highest number of submissions ever on the issue of an endangered species, showing America's support for the wolf, as we've heard from other speakers as well. Here in Wisconsin, I don't have to tell you everything that's happened. Someone mentioned the polling earlier. Polling was done in the state showing that, do you support or oppose the trophy hunting of trapping of wolves for sport? 81% no, 10% support. Do you support or oppose the use of traps, bait, and packs of dogs to kill wolves for sport? 87% opposed. And in Minnesota, it was pretty much the same thing as the gentleman mentioned previously, polling of the public, citizens of the state of Minnesota opposing it, but the wolf management plan that did call for waiting 5 years before starting the hunt and trap was simply circumvented by the powers that be. Polling also showed that citizens supported legislation to at least put a moratorium on the hunt that was going forward, and that they opposed the use of traps and snares in the wolf hunt in that state as well. And it's not just wolves. We've seen this around the country with other wildlife species as well. Recently, the state of Florida decided to have a bear hunt, even though the citizens opposed it at a commission meeting there in Florida. Many people showed up, and the commissioners themselves said about 75% of the citizens in the room expressed opposition to having a bear hunt in that state. Polling showed strong opposition to it. Most supported educational programs, recognized that it was the responsibility of neighborhoods to deal with making their neighborhoods not attractive to bears, and that having a hunt wouldn't do any good anyway. And as in Michigan, they showed outright contempt for the citizens who showed up to testify. One commissioner saying those people don't know what they're talking about, and made the astounding judgment and assessment of their outdoor recreational habits by saying most of these people have never been in the woods. How we knew that, I can't imagine. Same thing in Washington State, the cougar hunt recently. They've increased the quota of hunting cougars in areas where wolves live. They think that it's out of frustration that they cannot kill the wolves, so they're increasing the hunting of cougars in those areas. The decision was made in a commission meeting in 2 minutes, no public input, no opportunity for the people to comment. no formal agency input. And in Illinois, you may have just heard that the legislature rushed through a bill the very last day of the session to begin hunting the very small bobcat in the state. Legislators making bizarre statements on the floor of the Illinois legislature, one claiming he mistook a bobcat for a saber-toothed tiger, and another speculating that they could soon start dragging off women and children, little 30-pound bobcats there. So a helpful graphic was created, how to tell the difference. Is that a saber-toothed tiger or a bobcat? And polling was very similar as well in Illinois, showing that people, Democrats and Republicans, opposed it. But sadly, yesterday, Governor Rauner did sign the bill allowing the hunting and trapping of bobcats in Illinois. And of course, in Michigan is the most interesting, to me, example of the legislators and wildlife commissions and the DNR showing absolute contempt for the people of the state who oppose something and going to just extraordinary lengths. It begins back in 2011, prior to delisting, when Senator Tom Casperson, who has most of the UP, and Representative Matt Hookey passed resolutions urging Congress to support the delisting of wolves. And in those resolutions, identical resolutions, was the statement, federal agents disposed of 3 wolves in the backyard of a daycare center because of the potential danger to children. Well, the only problem was, even though Nancy Warren had informed her senator that this incident did not happen, well, it didn't happen. He had to later apologize on the Senate floor for telling that story, and it made the rounds in different versions. Sometimes they were chasing kids around the playground, around the bus stop, you name it. Apparently wolves recently have started to frequent retirement homes in the UP too, picking off, the elderly people. So despite all of that, though, legislation, wolves, of course, were delisted, and legislation was introduced in the fall of 2012 to designate the wolf as a game species. And just as an example of how the DNR and the Natural Resources Commission collaborated with legislators behind the scenes to get this done, in August, a House version of the bill was introduced, and as you can see, it mentioned the sound scientific management of wolves is in the public interest, et cetera. Well, that bill died in committee. Its author didn't have much power. When Casperson introduced the Senate version of the bill in October, you'll notice the sound management of wolf populations in the state is necessary, et cetera. Well, we all wondered, where's the science? What happened to the science? There's no longer scientific management of wolves. Well, it wasn't until about a year later, through the Freedom of Information Act, what we found was that the chief of the Wildlife Division of the DNR, Russ Mason, advised Senator Casperson that perhaps instead of scientific management, we might want to find another term. The science will be debatable in all of this, so let's find some term like professional or some such. We'll see that term professional show up later on in this crazy saga as well. And this has been echoed, had already been echoed by scientists and continued to be asserted by scientists throughout the campaign, that there was no science behind having a wolf hunt in our state, including Rolf Peterson and John Vucetich in a report to the Natural Resources Commission advising against having a wolf hunt for, among other reasons, that it is contrary to many principles of the North American model of wildlife conservation. And then later in the report that Ari mentioned as well, where they just bluntly said, after analyzing everything, there's no, it's not scientifically sound, and we recommend that you do not harvest wolves while that is the case. And then in early 2015, 50 world-renowned wolf scientists wrote to Congress, echoing the same thing, that there is no scientific reason to be hunting wolves and that they should not be delisted as well. Another way that the DNR and the Natural Resources Commission circumvented the public and worked with the legislature is to advise them on how to coach the language so that it isn't in opposition to what the public believes about wolf hunting. And as Russ Mason said, it's really important that the bill continue to say that hunting will be a conflict management tool that's entirely consistent with the language of the wolf management plan. We do not want language that specifically addresses recreational hunting. That's a catalyst for controversy we might not win. What he's referring to is, of course, do polling through MSU and other entities throughout the years. It is clear that the people of the state of Michigan do not support a recreational wolf hunt. And they knew that as well. And a panel of stakeholders, including Nancy and many others, had developed a wolf management plan for our state prior to delisting that was very clear, that it did not support a recreational hunt unless some very specific criteria were met that the plan said at the time had not even come close to being met. And one of them you'll see in number 3, if biologically defensible, legally feasible, and supported by the public, then we might start drawing up some kinds of plans. Well, that was certainly problematic. So recently the DNR took public comments about updating the wolf management plan, and many comments were submitted, and the plan was changed, and they pointed out most of those changes to the public. But what they didn't point out was that number 3 was changed very subtly. If biologically sustainable, legally feasible, and socially responsible, then they might draw up plans for a wolf hunt. So the public support was no longer wanted or needed. So that change was made without informing anyone in the public. And again, we saw when legislation was introduced to designate the wolf as a game species in Michigan, the opposition was swift and quite substantial from the public. Wolf scientists, Upper Peninsula, Lower Peninsula residents, of course the Native American tribes, scientists, hunters, conservation groups, humane groups. Only 4 documents were supported or submitted in that legislative hearing for the bill, and came from the predictable sources, including a cattle farmer who said, well, he knew having a wolf hunt wouldn't actually do any good. It would just be great to see some wolves getting shot. So anyway, the bill got introduced and passed in December of 2012. The wolf was designated as a game species in Michigan. The citizens of the state then utilized a unique power that we have in the state of Michigan in the Midwest, is that the citizens can actually veto newly enacted legislation with a citizens' referendum if you collect enough signatures within 90 days of the end of the session. So ultimately we had just 67 days in a freezing cold winter, brutally cold winter, from copper country down to the Motor City and everywhere in between, and in just 67 days turned in 256,916 voter signatures to the legislature, or to the Secretary of State, to put that new bill on hold. And we were pretty excited. We thought we'd done it. It would go to the ballot in the next general election. The citizens, as we knew, did not support wolf hunting and would vote it down, and the wolves would be protected. Well, the problem is, of course, the legislature and the DNR and the NRC, the policy generating body for the DNR, knew that too. So Tom Casperson quickly introduced a second bill, SB 288, and what that allows is the unelected Natural Resources Commission to simply designate wolves as game on their own. Free of any citizen oversight at all. They can make their own decisions. They're governor appointed and not subject to any voter oversight. They also tacked on a $1 million appropriation under our state constitution. Legislation with a fiscal note or appropriation cannot be overturned by referendum. This would circumvent the citizen vote on the issue, allow them to just redesignate wolves as game, and continue on with their wolf hunt unburdened by what the public thinks about it. Of course, there was a lot of protests, and as one public radio commentator pointed out, they don't care what you think. The bill passed. Another way, though, by this time, though, it was becoming pretty transparent that they were doing this simply to circumvent the citizen vote on the wolf issue. So Senator Casperson's staffer wrote to the NRC and to some legislators and made sure they understood that we're passing a third law, a right to hunt and fish law, and that'll give these legislators some cover. They won't look quite so much like the bad guys trying to circumvent the citizen vote. It'll give them some cover, and it'll look like they're just voting for the citizens' rights. So the law passed anyway, and but then soon after that, our citizen signatures became certified, put the first law on hold. The wolf was no longer a game species in Michigan. But as expected, the NRC just quickly used its newfound power, redesignated the wolf as game, and had its hunt that fall. Now, another way that the citizen and the democratic process and citizen input was circumvented was in that NRC vote. Citizens are encouraged to write in their comments on the issue. What we found through the Freedom of Information Act is an email from the chair of the NRC telling his secretary to just go ahead and trash all of those emails coming in from citizens, and of the ones that survived that weren't trash, only 13 of the 3,600 plus signature or comments were in support of wolf hunting. The rest were opposed. Thousands of citizen comments on the issue ignored or deleted. And the NRC also ignored the Open Meetings Act and collaborated among themselves by email, thinking how best to get this hunt going before they can do another referendum vote. But they were too late because we announced we were doing a second ballot referendum on that second law, went back out and collected another 230,000 signatures to place that on the ballot as well. Well, not to be outdone, what they did next was enlist the hunting and trapping lobby group, Michigan United Conservation Clubs, to recycle that second law, allowing the NRC to designate game as a citizens' initiative. Took the same language, slapped it on a petition, started collecting signatures, put in that $1 million appropriation so that it couldn't be overturned again, and threw in some hunting and fishing licenses for military that were free, not mentioning they were $1 in order to get those Pittman-Robertson funds. I'll just go quickly through the media. Reaction was quite comical in this, and Michigan media just taking some real pot shots. If they care at all about their citizens, they will do it. This legislation has nothing to do with wildlife management, science, or even our heritage of hunting. It's about politics and power. And one of my favorites was the Petoskey News, Our View When Democracy Dies. Their voter fear is undeniable, but nonetheless, they enlisted their ace in the hole, the Motor City Madman, to make personal phone calls to legislators, because the initiative legislation goes to the legislature, not to the ballot. And the legislature began to get personal phone calls from Ted Nugent urging them to pass the legislation. And if you really want a credible source on ethical hunting, that's who you're going to go to, is Ted Nugent. So, and it worked. It passed August of 2014, became law in the spring of 2015. So now, if we hadn't won the lawsuit to put the wolves back on the endangered species list, even though the citizens voted down both laws allowing wolves to be hunted in the November election, won by a landslide vote, because of that third law, the NRC could redesignate wolves as game and begin a wolf hunt this fall if needed. And even though the polling showed that the Michigan voters do not want the legislators to do that. I'm running over, so I was going to just go into a little bit about how the wildlife of this state or in all of our states is held in the public trust, and that we need to get more non-consumptive users involved directly in the process of commissions and in the legislature. I want to just point out real quick a study that has just come out, and this is something we already knew, but a couple of people with Nevada's for Wildlife Management get it down on paper and did a really good job in assessing the amount of support for non-consumptive users for wildlife management, finding conservation funding by the public is about 93.9%. Of money coming in for conservation comes from the non-hunting public. Direct land management funding, about 95.1%, and even Pittman-Robertson funds and Dingell-Johnson funds that most people think just automatically comes from hunters. They found that really only about 14.5% is from actual hunting license or hunting ammunition revenue. So And then they just talked a little bit about, and I have copies of this study if you want to read it. I think it's very exciting. But just basically encouraging the public, the non-consumptive public, for all of the public to get more involved in wildlife management because we pay for it. Also responsible hunters as well. And I'll just leave with this one. I thought this was great. This was from a blog about a year ago. As an avid and passionate hunter in Montana, he's appalled that no hunter-based conservation organizations are speaking out against the wolf slaughter. It's embarrassing, appalling, and outrageous. So I'll just leave it at that, and be happy to take any questions about the Keep Michigan Wolves Protected campaign.
Yeah, we have time for a couple questions, so. Questions for the ballot initiative queen.
Referendum, yeah.
Any questions?
I said everything so well, or confused everybody so much, so.
Okay,
Maureen?
let me come to you.
That's right. So just give us an idea, how did you collect 230,000 signatures?
Yeah, 256,000. Yeah, ultimately it was about 500,000 signatures. Yeah, you can't, they're a legal document, so they have to be signed pen to paper. So we were just out everywhere around the state. It was very helpful. It was January in that brutally cold winter. The Native American casinos in Harbor Springs and Sault Ste. Marie, et cetera, were very kind to let us collect signatures inside the casinos, but at street fairs, the Plymouth Ice Festival, every possible indoor festival, but also out on the street as well. The ink in our pens was freezing, so we had to use gel ink too. Yes. I will tell you, people were grabbing the pens out of our hands to sign them. And a guy would be head to toe in camouflage and he would say, hell yes, I'll sign your petition. Why would anybody want to hunt a wolf? So as someone was saying earlier, it was not your rank and file hunters that opposed it. It was the hunting lobby groups. So yes, and people could not wait to sign the petition twice. Yeah, so we did.
In the 70s and 80s, Michigan, was known for its Environmental Rights Act as being one of the most powerful in the country because it allowed a citizen to sue directly
Yeah.
on environmental
Allow citizens to sue?
infractions. Yeah, what's
Yeah.
the current state of the Environmental Rights Act in Michigan?
I don't know. We have not utilized that act. We did, Keep Michigan Wolves Protected did file a lawsuit against the so-called Scientific Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act as the language as unconstitutional. And there were several problems with it. Just yesterday, or 2 days ago, the judge in the claims court did reject that lawsuit in this bizarrely written and rambling decision that cited Porky Pig, the Big Bad Wolf, and Bob Dylan, among others. But we will be taking that to appellate court next. So, but no, we did not utilize the Natural Resources Defense Act in this campaign. So.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.